All right, Honors, your final one for this weekend that you're taking a look at is Act 2, Scene 4. And when we open this scene up, it's Mercutio and Benvolio on the streets of Verona. We can signify the passing of time because it's morning and they're chatting, and he says, "Where should this Romeo be?" And Benvolio says, "He didn't come to his father's. I spoke with his man." Okay, his man means his servant, and basically his servant says, "He hasn't come home yet." And to prove that his two best friends still believe that he's in love with Rosalind because Romeo has not expressed it to anyone else, Mercutio says, "Why, that same pale, hard-hearted wench that Rosalind torments him so, that he is going to be run mad. He's going to be upset." So the biggest thing is we get, know for your quiz, the foreshadow that Tybalt made at the party. Remember, Tybalt said, "It might seem sweet right now, but I'll have my revenge." And Benvolio highlights that a letter has been sent to Romeo. Mercutio says, "I know it's going to be a challenge." And Benvolio says, "Romeo will answer a challenge." Well, we have to presume that certainly this is the way that challenges were issued, challenging to duels. And in essence, when they saw a letter that was from the House of Montague, it certainly wasn't inviting Romeo over for a tea party. Benvolio says he knows that Romeo will answer it. In essence, he'll be man enough to take care of the person who's writing the letter. And Mercutio says anybody can write a letter. So Benvolio gets more specific. No, he'll dare being dared. Mercutio, though, is not so sure. He's like, "Our poor Romeo, he's already dead. He's been stabbed with that arrow because of Rosalind." He says one of the funniest examples of alliteration and an illusion. Know that, an illusion. He says, "He's been hit by the blind boy's butt shaft." I giggle at it. Blind boy, bow, archery, bow and arrow. And if who's blind? Well, Cupid is consistently showcased as carrying his bow and arrow, but with a blindfold around his eyes. So he says, "How can a man who is all drawn out by love encounter Tybalt?" Benvolio's like, "Who's Tybalt?" And he says, "Well, he's kind of a skilled fighter." And all of these terms right here are dueling terms. So, right when they're commenting on whether or not Romeo is man enough, Romeo actually comes into the scene. Now, he comes in ridiculously happy. He's fallen for Juliet, she, him. This one finally likes her back, and the friar said they'd marry him. Romeo's elated. And it's quite the turn of events from the way that he has been treating his friends. So Mercutio is kind of salty with him in the beginning. He says, "Hey, here's a salutation, a hi for you. You gave us a counterfeit. You ran away from us last night." And Romeo says, "Good morning to you. I didn't give you a counterfeit. I'm not mad at you." And Mercutio says, "Yes, you did. You ran away. You ran away. Can't you understand what you did?" And Romeo says, "Come on, Mercutio. My business was really great." And he doesn't say what the business is. So he says, "My business was great. Don't be mad at me." And then they start teasing one another because Romeo's in a good mood. He says, they're making fun of curtsies and who's being a courtesy pink, teasing him who's being more girly. And these are going back and forth between Romeo and Mercutio, teasing one another about being manly again. And then Mercutio says, "Oh, come between us, Benvolio," calling for the peacekeeper. "Come between us," because their wits, their banter is too much for him. And Mercutio ends their like bantering back and forth by saying, see, isn't this better than groaning for love? Why isn't this better than groaning for love? You're sociable now. You're back. You're our Romeo. And Benvolio then agrees, and right when Romeo's about to say something, the nurse is Juliet's servant who's been sent, it's past 9 o'clock, to get the word. So the nurse comes, Juliet's servant comes with her servant, Peter. And flatly, now these guys are nowhere where I would want to be. The nurse has been sent out in her royal garb in the middle of July to go seek out a band of 17 to 21-year-old boys who have been gesturing and playfully bantering back and forth. They're all riled up, and she's supposed to talk to them. And Mercutio is the first one who starts to tease that her dress isn't a royal dress. It's more like a shirt and a smock, and they're making fun of all this royal garb that she's wearing, and the nurse is calling for her servant, and then she says, Peter, will you hand me my fan? And Mercutio says, yeah, give her fan to hide her face, for the fan is something better to look at. Oh my goodness, of all the places she could be. The nurse is kind of like, oh my goodness, did he just say that? And we actually find out what time of day it is. Remember, he said 9 o'clock, but Mercutio greets her, good afternoon. It's noon. And the nurse says, is it really noon? And Mercutio says, yes, it is. The dial is now upon the prick of noon. Now, the nurse says, does anyone know where she could find Romeo? Romeo starts, furthering Mercutio's teasing, because he says, oh yeah, well, when you find him, he will be older than when you first started out, because technically it's already been a couple minutes. So he's just teasing. It's not particularly hilarious, but it's basically 17 to 20-year-old boys picking on somebody because they can. The nurse says, I need to talk to you in some confidence. Benvolio and Mercutio start laughing, thinking that she's there to invite him to some supper or out with somebody, and then Mercutio breaks into a song. He literally grabs her dress and starts flipping it in the air and starts singing this terrible, terrible song. And then he yells, Romeo, will you come up to lunch with me? Will you go to your father's for dinner? Romeo's like, okay, I'll follow you. You just go up. Again, notice, he never tells him. He never tells him who the nurse is or why she's there. And they don't know that he's still not dwelling on Rosalind. Mercutio ends the teasing of the nurse wretchedly. He says, farewell, ancient lady. Farewell, old lady. Oh my goodness, you don't say that to a girl. So the nurse is beside herself, and she says, who was this saucy merchant? Who was this bad boy that was making fun of me? Romeo says, he just loves to hear himself talk, and he's going to talk more in a minute than he'll stand up to in a month. And the nurse says, thank you. And she says to him, now, you're supposed to tell me what's going on. And if you lead her to a fool's paradise, if you're steering her in some bad direction because you are a not faithful guy, then you should beware, because my lady is young, and that's not a very gentlemanly thing to do. And Romeo says, no, commend me to your lady and your mistress. I speak the truth. And she says, bid her some device, some plan to go to Shrift, to go to the monk. And there, in Friar Lawrence's cell, she will be married this afternoon. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's right, people. They have known each other for less than 24 hours and they will already be married. Well, the nurse is elated and she says, I'll see you this afternoon. And they depart. This business down here shows that the nurse isn't really that bright, but it also is a little bit of a lace of a reminder. So know this, because she says, "Hey, doesn't Romeo start with a letter of the alphabet?" Yes. Well, hmm. Doth Rosemary and Romeo begin with the same letter? And Romeo's like, yes, they both begin with R. And she says, no, it can't be R. Well, what is important for you to know? R is a letter that is supposed, I know this is weird, sorry guys, but letter is supposed to have a bad connotation, a bad meaning associated with it. Like images or of the dog or the serpent is supposed to be more evil. And she's saying, no, it can't be. Well, it sounds odd that it's been put there at the end. But remember, Shakespeare is constantly reminding you that there's something that is going to go awry here. And then they depart, Romeo going his way to lunch with Mercutio and Benvolio, and the nurse back to tell Juliet what has happened. Thanks for listening.